Hello, sorry about that. This is the second in my Saturn Now and Forever series. Of course, with the Forever, a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek because Saturn representing time, you know, no such thing as forever. In the last video, I spoke somewhat about a bit about what Saturn means just generally, and in future videos, I'll talk about more what it means in each sign, should it be there in your chart, and in each of the astrological houses. Um, but in this particular video, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to do a little bit more about Saturn now. So right now, Saturn has just gone retrograde, which means it appears to be moving backwards from here on Earth. It's at around 16 degrees Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a mutable sign. Saturn does not particularly like to be in Sagittarius or any of the mutable signs. I don't think it's so happy in. This means that what I want to talk about is those of you who are going through your Saturn return. This means that in your astrological chart, when you were born, Saturn was at approximately 16 degrees Sagittarius. If Saturn was at approximately 16 degrees of any of the other mutable signs, which would be Virgo, Pisces, and Gemini, there are certain ramifications for you as well, but they are not as powerful as the ramifications if Saturn was at approximately 16 degrees Sagittarius. Now, let's say Saturn was at 20 degrees Sagittarius when you were born. Actually, things might be a little bit more difficult for you now, because often with Saturn returns, it's more painful before. The building up to the Saturn return is often worse than when Saturn actually hits that point where it was before. There's usually something of a breakthrough. Now, Saturn often appears to go back and forth. Sometimes Saturn just sweeps right by and your Saturn return is fast. Sometimes it goes back and forth over the course of a year, which can be a really fun year. Typically what that means is that the first time is the most painful, the most difficult, and especially leading up to it. But when Saturn hits that point, say 16 degrees Sagittarius, you kind of get something. Then it goes backwards and there's more to deal with, but you understand it better. It coalesces more the second time. And if there's a third time, I don't think there's ever any more than a third time. That third time, there's the real breakthroughs. And you just learn more. Other people who would also be very strongly affected right now would be people who have their sun at 16 degrees Sagittarius, or 16 degrees Virgo, 16 degrees Pisces, or 16 degrees Gemini, because Saturn would be affecting you right now. Now, if you fall into any of those categories, and especially if this is your Saturn return, you are having a very messy one. Saturn's returns are never easy, so, it's not necessarily the case that you're having a particularly difficult one, but you're certainly having a messy one. All of us are having a messy time of it right now because Saturn is forming a stressful aspect with the planet Neptune, and Saturn and Neptune as two planets, they don't play well together. They represent almost opposite energies. Saturn is limitation, it's being grounded, it's on the earth, it's like, this is what you need to deal with, and Neptune is like, we're all just energy vibrating, it represents drugs, which are famous for sort of breaking down barriers. It represents music, or art, other things that break down barriers. It represents psychic energy, which again specifically breaks down the barriers of you are you and I am me. It represents spirituality. Neptune is all of those things which don't have boundaries. And Saturn is all of those things that do have boundaries. Neptune is in the sign it likes to be in, at Pisces. In Pisces, so this has very powerful ramifications for those with any planets in Pisces. And I didn't even talk about the moon, because it obviously, if you have your moon in any of these signs, that's a whole other ball of wax. That's also something to pay attention to. Uh, and also, on top of Saturn and Neptune forming a difficult aspect, across from Neptune is Jupiter in Virgo. Jupiter in Virgo is, in and of itself, not a bad thing. It's around the same degrees. It's actually at 15 degrees Virgo, and it's going retrograde. But it just magnifies everything, exaggerates everything. That's why there's so many issues right now around truth and lying, and people calling each other liars, and people getting away with lying, and nobody believing like the Saturnian old ways that those have any value at all. So if you're going through your Saturn return right now, it is going to be particularly difficult to figure out what kind of sense you're supposed to make of it, because you are getting mixed messages up the wazoo. So who is this? I will tell you which what years. You could look this up yourself, or you could get an ephemeris, or you can do your chart online and find out. And again, if your birthday falls somewhat before this, you've been going through it and you may still be going through some aspects of it. If your birthday falls after it, you may be feeling this already and dealing with some of it as well. Again, the good news about a Saturn return is that typically it's really, really hard leading up to it. And then as it hits, you really get something. People make powerful, positive changes in their life with their Saturn return. They change jobs, they get promotions, they move, they get rid of the things that are supposed to be gotten rid of in order to be able to do what they really need to do in their life. All right, so starting with those of you who are in the 28 to 29 category. If you're born at the end of 1986, that would definitely be true. Some of you are kind of finishing up your Saturn return. Certainly most of 1987. There's a few different spots in 1987, mostly around the spring, but definitely at the beginning of 1987 and, from kind of June on, with a little bit of a break there somewhere. And a little bit less as it gets towards the end. So you're going through it. The second Saturn return, people, is, for the most part, it's most of 1957. Certainly the end of 1957. A little bit of 1958. This was that, in that particular year, Saturn did kind of zip through the middle of the sign. So actually some of you in 1957 and 1958 aren't having it yet. As you get towards the end of 1958, though, it is kind of coming on. So certainly in August of 1958, you're dealing with your Saturn return now, and it should be kind of more solidified. Those of you later have been dealing with this for a while, and at least it's not, it's stressful, but the finish up will be better. And should you be fortunate enough to be going through your third Saturn return, when would that be? End of 1928, most of 1928, actually. Saturn spent a lot of time around that then. So, and then for your birthdays, if you want to find out if you're about 16 degrees of the sign this year, it varies a little bit like year to year. And once again, if your birthday's before this, you've been going through this and you may still be dealing with it. If your birthday's after this, you are definitely feeling it. Definitely feeling it. But, there's more to come. All right. So this year, around 16 degrees Sagittarius is December 7th. 16 degrees Gemini is June 4th. And 16 degrees Virgo is September 7th. And 16 degrees Pisces is March 5th. So, again, I think what for you more than anybody else have to really pay attention to the notion that it's very, very difficult to get a grip on what's going on right now, that you're getting huge mixed messages. You could feel even more depressed than people often feel during their Saturn return, because there'll be such a strong sense, and all of us are dealing with this to some degree, that there's something we're supposed to be doing, but you just can't figure out what it is. And the world around you is kind of going crazy right now. Since Mars is recently moved into Sagittarius. It's moving on to Saturn. It's very important right now to develop some patience, because Mars on Sagittarius getting involved in this is first of all, because it's making the aspect to Neptune, people can get sick. But also there's a tendency with Mars and Saturn to kind of fight, and to fight hopeless fights that can't be won. Unless you're fighting for something that really matters and you really believe in, take a step back, because there's a good chance that all of the information is not there and you will just end up, tripping all over your own feet. There's a lot of frustration that's kind of generally in the air, and a sense that powerful sense that I've got to be doing something and going somewhere and getting something done, but I can't. So in the face of this, there's no one answer, and there's certainly there's no one answer for everyone. There's no one answer for everything. There's certainly in the worst case scenario, as we are seeing some in our world, there can be violent eruptions of this kind of frustration. Violent eruptions spurred by mistaken religious beliefs, violent eruptions spurred by, God knows what, people, believing strongly in something that anybody in their right mind would know, like, couldn't possibly be true. But again, in your personal life, you really want to try to avoid this kind of violence or action, and you have more control over your personal life than you do over the world. So it's very important to understand, I think more than anything, that it's not an easy time, that no one's having an easy time of it, and it's very difficult to get a grip of what is supposed to be happening. All you can do is have some patience, take your best shot at it, and do the things that seem to make the most sense to do, and then let it go. There is some positive energy for that, for spirituality, but not for going to extremes with it. Even in your own practice, this is more a time to take the kind of energy that makes some sense to do, and then let it go. Say the thing that comes up and let it go. There's a lot of that, because because the sun's in Aries and there's some other signs in Aries, and you really don't, you want to say it, but you really want to then drop it. All right. Next time I will talk more about Saturn in the different signs, or Saturn in the different houses. I'm not really sure which. And till then, enjoy the lovely Saturn aspects these days. Bye.